So here's the thing, in case you weren't already aware, archaeology is actually part of a greater discipline called anthropology. So what is anthropology? Well, some common misconceptions about this academic discipline are that, we only study dead people. Well, as an archaeologist, this is actually true, but not for all anthropologists. I can also tell you that all anthropologists are not only interested in lost tribes, as they are sometimes called, and it is most definitely not a useless major. Anthropology as a term itself is Greek. It means the study of man. And as anthropologists, we study human societies across space and time to understand what makes us similar or different. Ruth Benedict, who you see pictured here on the right, was very influential in helping us to understand differences across culture and appreciate them within their greater context. This is something called cultural relativism. And let's see, so as a discipline, we look at both biological and social aspects of humanity, and we attempt to increase our scope of questions that can be addressed by other humanities fields. So, from a definition perspective, anthropology is the study of humankind. More specifically, it's the scientific study of the origin, the behavior, and the physical, social, and cultural developments of humans. And it actually is a four-field discipline. The first of those four subdisciplines is Sociocultural Anthropology, and this is the study of contemporary cultures through which we consider how we are organized socially and what factors make cultures similar or different. This involves understanding how people understand each other and interact with the world around them, as well as with each other. And we tend to engage in this form of research through what's called participant observation. And so this is when anthropologists go and live within a society, within a different culture, to learn what they can about the inner workings, the belief systems, the language, everything they can about that particular culture. And this doesn't just have to be, again, these lost tribes or very distant peoples. Anthropology even happens in our urban societies today. Sociocultural studies take two prominent forms, the first being ethnographies, which are, a study of a specific single culture. So I see two examples of that in the books on the right. There is also what's called ethnology, and that consists of a cross-cultural study. So for example, if you were interested in looking at rice farming as a practice, you might choose two case studies, perhaps China and Gambia, where you can learn how what things are similar or different in rice farming across these two cultures, or two case studies. Linguistic anthropology is another of the four subfields. This is the study of human language, its construction and history, as well as how it's used in societies. It's very important for us to recognize the link between language, worldview, and social organization. So learning about how people communicate, how languages change over time, as well as how language can influence our culture and how people act. The map you see on the right is actually a map of different indigenous languages across North America, which is quite interesting when you have a good look at it. The third subdiscipline is physical anthropology, which is sometimes called evolutionary or biological anthropology as well, because it is the study of human biological evolution and variation, as well as the biology of human beings and our closest primate relatives. This discipline examines human adaptation to the environment by studying fossil and modern primates. You can see Lucy here depicted on the left. This also nowadays involves DNA research to look at the relations between different populations of people. A subfield of physical anthropology then is, it's called forensic anthropology, and so otherwise known as applied physical anthropology. Not a separate subdiscipline, this falls under physical anthropology. And these researchers, they use anthropological techniques in the medical legal arena. and they are often involved in many investigations into human rights violations. And lastly, but certainly not least, because that's the focus of our class, is the subdiscipline of archaeology. As I said in our previous lecture, this is the scientific study of human societies through their material remains. We seek to understand how people lived and interacted with each other and their environment. And we are often doing this, often reconstructing the past without written or oral records. So we're using only our analytical techniques to do these investigations. So there you have it. Those are the 4 fields of anthropology. Now, anthropology is famous for what's called the holistic approach, and this is an attempt to understand human behavior in a holistic sense. So all aspects of human existence go into what makes our culture. And because of that, anthropology is very multidisciplinary. We integrate methods from many different subfields in order to understand everything we can about a particular society. This approach builds from some basic principles, that humans shape their material environment, humans differ in physical form, humans have unique communication systems, and humans have learned knowledge systems. So what is this culture concept that we keep talking about? Well, it's an integrated system of beliefs, traditions, and customs that govern or influence a person's behavior. Culture is what provides a way for us to interpret human behavior and allows each of us to actually interpret the world around us. But most importantly, culture is learned, culture is complex and dynamic, it's shared by members of a group, and it's based on the ability to think in terms of symbols. So within a particular society, there's a symbol that might mean something like, let's say, the Star of David within Jewish culture that represents something of importance, and it's something that even non-group members can recognize, but those who live within the group probably take greater meaning or significance from that particular symbol. The way we understand our culture then is very dependent on our perspective, and there's a few different terms that are important for this. The first being the Emic Perspective, and this is what's called the insider's view, or the perspective of the subject. So you as a member of American society have a certain understanding of how things work, why people say or do the things they do, because you yourself are a member of that society. Now, the opposite of that is what's called Edic Perspective, and that's the outsider's view. So us as Americans trying to understand why things are done differently in China, that's us as using our Edic perspective. We can't comprehend the meaning behind different practices or beliefs because we're not a part of that society. Now, I mentioned cultural relativism earlier, and this is the standard for anthropological research nowadays because it's a concept that stipulates that all cultures must be understood in their own terms. That is, there's no universal standard to measure cultures. So cultures can differ, but doesn't make any of them better or worse or more important than any other culture. The opposite of that then is what we call ethnocentrism. And this is a belief that one's own cultural ways are superior to others and thus should be used as a standard to measure all other cultures or beliefs. We'll talk a little bit more about how and why this framework of understanding was abandoned when we talk about the history of anthropology, but just know that nowadays cultural relativism is cool. Some funny comics then to help us kind of reiterate, what is ethnocentrism, to get us to start thinking outside the box, thinking about this sort of Edic versus Emic perspective. The other is something that we can all recognize, but it's to not pass judgment on the other that is most important. So this brings us to activity 2 of the semester, which is what is your culture? So we all live within a culture that tends to be labeled. It is associated with characteristic attributes or behavioral patterns, and our culture shapes our social institutions and moral norms. So what I would like you to do is to go back over to our Flipgrid group, and there is a separate discussion board where I want you to tell us, what's your name, again, where are you from, what culture or cultures do you belong to, what attributes or behaviors distinguish your culture from others, and how do you express your culture materially. I look forward to hearing from you.